Honey, what are you listening to?
Mom!
Your teen might not share everything with you, but teens share everything with each other. And certain everyday behaviors, like sharing food, drinks, or kisses, could mean sharing bacteria that can cause meningococcal disease, known as meningitis. Although meningitis is uncommon, about 1 in 10 who develop it will die. Ask your teen's doctor about missing meningitis vaccinations. Learn more at meningitis.com. Vaccination may not protect all recipients. Sponsored by GSK.
This is the Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. Yes, it is the greatest nation on God's green earth, though most of the earth doesn't think so. Not anymore. As recently as 5 years ago, the United States was revered, admired, respected, basically seen as the superpower that guided the whole world. Today, that's not the case. And meanwhile, there are all kinds of problems being faced by this great nation, including green algae in the reflecting pool that now appears to be part of a much deeper problem. No easy solution. And in fact, President Trump employing the wrong solutions and making this a big issue in his presidency. It is apparently, the Washington Post reports, a much deeper issue than that, and one that has to do with problems in the environment that President Trump has pointedly wanted to ignore. We will get to the reflecting pond crisis coming up on the Medved Show, but there's a bigger and more imminent crisis, one that should trouble everybody. I don't care who you are, Republican, Democrat, which is the big winner in the primary elections that were held yesterday, particularly those elections in New York State. The big winner wasn't the Democrats. It wasn't the Republicans. It wasn't MAGA. The big winner was the Democratic Socialists of America. There was a socialist sweep. There's a piece in a very sobering piece in National Review, which starts out, the socialists are on the march. And they are. They swept elections. And this creates a situation where the mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani, is like a new political boss for the country. And there are comments on all of this by President Trump, who basically says that no one should be covering this news. But how do you not cover news that is as shocking as all of this? Meanwhile, this from CBS, President Trump canceled a planned signing ceremony today. What was he going to be signing? A landmark bipartisan housing bill. It's a housing affordability bill that passed Congress by huge margins, bipartisan margins. But President Trump is refusing to sign the legislation into law until lawmakers go back and pass his elections bill, known as the Save America Act. That is to save all of our voting eligibility. That's what the SAVE stands for. Mr. Trump was set to sign the housing bill known as the 21st Century Road to Housing Act during an event at the Capitol. The measure, the most comprehensive housing legislation in decades, aims to increase housing supply and bring down costs, including by limiting institutional investors from purchasing certain single-family homes. It's a complicated bill, but one that seems to provide some hope for making housing more available at a more affordable cost, but it may not ever be signed now if President Trump means to refuse to sign the bill. In other words, to veto the bill, which he can do. Meanwhile, breaking news from NBC concerning Iran. The head of the UN's nuclear agency signaled today that Iranian nuclear enrichment sites would be visited by his inspectors. This is a key component in the interim deal between the United States and Iran to reach an end to the war. But an Iranian diplomat promptly rejected this statement by the head of the UN nuclear agency, saying such a visit can only come after a final deal, a denial that highlighted the precariousness of the ongoing negotiations. The remarks by International Atomic Energy Agency head, that's part of the UN, Rafael Mariano Grossi, those comments were the firmest yet from the United Nations agency, which is viewed as key in determining the status of Iran's nuclear stockpile. Since 2005, the IAEA has been blocked by Tehran from visiting enrichment sites where the Islamic Republic is believed to store enough highly enriched uranium to potentially build as many as 10 nuclear weapons. Can you imagine what these people in Iran might do with 10 different nuclear bombs? Should it come to a rush for the bomb, Iran has long maintained that its program is only peaceful, though it is the only country in the world to have uranium enriched up to 60% purity without a weapons program. And of course, the evidence is it does have a weapons program. Meanwhile, on another defense issue, I guess it's a defense issue, Donald Trump has added AI security cameras and is deploying the National Guard to patrol the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool after his botched renovation. The U.S. president paid $14 million to restore the reflecting pool in Washington before the U.S.'s 250th anniversary, celebrated coming up on July 4th. But it has since been plagued by blooming algae, that's bloomin' algae, and peeling paint. Mr. Trump has blamed the problems on vandals and increased security with the National Guard, U.S. Park Police, and cameras deployed around the pool. But there is now evidence that what's happening in the reflecting pool is a much bigger problem, and it's a major environmental problem throughout the country, not just at this one pool. Meanwhile, CBS is reporting that the federal government awarded a company owned by a Trump donor. They awarded him a $1.7 million contract to install a new water cleaning system for the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool. As President Trump pushes to overhaul the pool and struggles with a bout of algae and a peeling paint job. Now, the way they've written this in CBS, it sounds that Trump is struggling with a bout of algae as if he has algae on his body somewhere. Does that explain what's going on with hands and feet and other extremities? And a peeling paint job, is that also part of a personal symptom for Trump? The no-bid contract to install a nano-bubble filtration system went to Green Water Solutions, an Ohio-based company whose owner is listed on federal contracting documents as J.J. Cafaro Investment Trust. The president and CEO of that trust is identified as John J. Cafaro on the Federal Election Commission's filings, a major donor to support Trump. Meanwhile, another Senate vote about the war in Iran, a vote to end the war by a margin of 50 to 48 votes in the U.S. Senate. What does this mean, and where do we go from here? Well, we'll be right back. That's where we go. Coming up on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved show, there's an article by John Fund in the National Review under the alarming headline, Socialism is on the March. And this article was written a couple of days ago before the primary elections that occurred yesterday. And those primary elections, including 3 congressional races in New York State, were a socialist sweep, a complete and unexpected sweep. And this goes along with the general rise to power of the socialist movement, the democratic socialist movement. They claim to be members of the Democratic Party. Well, except their leader, Bernie Sanders, who is in many ways the leader here, is not a member of the Democratic Party. He's an independent senator from Vermont. And Zoram Mamdani is the real boss. The Drudge Report has a smiling picture of Mamdani together with the headlines, Mamdani Sweep, Socialists Rising, Earthquake, Eyes on White House. Mamdani can't get his eyes too fixated on the White House because he's not eligible to run. He was not born in the United States. And the Constitution still says that you have to be a natural-born citizen of the United States in order to run for and be elected to the presidency. But the fact is that there now is all kinds of discussion as to who the Democrats will pick. The John Fund writes, in recent months, members of the Democratic Socialists of America have been elected as mayors in New York City, in Seattle, heaven help us, and last week in Washington, D.C. This November, DSA, Democratic Socialists of America member, Nithya Raman, will face the incumbent Karen Bass in the Los Angeles mayoral election. The CNN data analyst Harry Enton notes that the Democratic Socialists of America have a net favorable rating of plus 17 among Democrats. And what's the rating among Democrats for congressional Democrats? It's plus 4. They're a better brand at this point than Democrats in Congress, marvels Harry Enton of CNN. Meanwhile, one of the losers yesterday in the primary elections in New York was one of the 2 Democratic incumbent members of the House who were voted out. And they were voted out largely on the issue of their support for Israel. The ousted New York City Democratic candidate Dan Goldman was running against another Jewish candidate in a heavily Jewish district. But Dan Goldman has been a supporter of Israel, not a particularly conspicuous one, but like I think most Americans up until the day before yesterday had looked at a situation where you have a Democratic ally of the United States that is being attacked by various terrorist organizations that also want to kill Americans. Well, sure, you support Israel, but not Lander, who is the victorious Democratic Socialist candidate who beat the incumbent Dan Goldman. And that losing candidate, the New York City Democrat, Congressman Goldman, warned that he believes that part of what worked against him, and I think he's right, was hatred of Israel. And much of that hatred of Israel is based on anti-Semitism, very obviously, it seems to me undeniably. Here is ousted New York City Democrat Dan Goldman warning about the future of this country that he loves, meaning the United States of America, of course. This is clip 18.
A long time ago, I won't say how long, I was inspired to go to law school by my idol, Jack Greenberg, who was the Jewish head of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund for 20 years, and stood side by side with Thurgood Marshall in litigating and winning Brown versus Board of Education. Jews have been at the forefront of every single civil rights issue in this country for the past century. And Jews have given back so much to this country. As history has taught us, anti-Semitic tropes and stereotypes, some of which I heard personally on this campaign, will ultimately be the undoing of our democracy if we all don't lean in and speak out, even if it's not politically expedient.
That's the voice of Dan Goldman, who unfortunately lost his election and lost his race for renomination and re-election in the Congress of the United States. There was also a socialist-backed, Mamdani-backed candidate for the New York Assembly named Brian Romero. And for people who doubt that these folks are way out of the mainstream and are, in fact, radical, not part of what anyone would recognize as a traditional Democratic Party, listen to this Brian Romero, who was a candidate for the New York State Assembly. This is clip 10.
Help us fight for the world we know is possible. Abolish ICE, free Palestine, and tax the mother rich. Thank you.
Tax the rich and abolish ICE. And yes, of course, I put in free Palestine. And then there is Bernie Sanders, who in many ways is the godfather of this whole movement. We will get to that. And then the reaction of more mainstream Democrats and Republicans to what is going on here. That and more coming your way, plus the vote by the Senate to try to restrict Trump's continuation of the war in Iran in any form. We will get to that and more coming up on the Michael Medved Show, and looking forward to putting it in perspective.
Join in your daily dose of debate.
I'm sorry, I cooled my temper here. You had me, my blood really boiling.
Listen to you occasionally when I'm driving, turns my stomach every time I do.
You are not always right. Get a grip. You are not always right.
The Michael Medved Show.
And on the Michael Medved Show, there was a reaction that President Trump posted to the elections last night, and particularly to their coverage. The President of the United States posted Mayor Mamdani pulled through 3 solid communists and has received loud and universal applause from the fake news media. Congratulations, Mr. Mayor. I went 16-0 last night, helping to elect powerful American patriots, and the media doesn't say a word, says the president. Over the last 2 years, my endorsement has netted 259 primary wins capitalized, and almost no losses, with 0 media attention, 3 exclamation points. Fake news, President DJT. Well, actually, I've been reading and digesting a great deal of the media attention to the socialist victories last night, and it has not been positive or cheerful. It has been what I think it is, which is a warning shot to how much the Democrats are out of touch with their own base. When you hear the kinds of positions that people are taking that are being endorsed by people like Mayor Mamdani. By the way, that's the other thing. He refers to him, President Trump, as Mayor Mamdani. He doesn't have a nickname yet. How come the mayor of New York, Mayor Red Mamdani or something like that? But I don't want to try to give the president any ideas, but he's got to be working on a nickname for Mamdani. Meanwhile, Bernie Sanders spoke about what he saw as the message in the election returns yesterday, the primary elections where socialists pretty much swept everything. This is Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont, talking about the Democratic Party, of which he's not quite a member, not officially a member yet, but he's run for their presidential nomination twice. Here's Bernie.
The politics and the policies of the Democratic establishment are no longer good enough. In this dangerous and unprecedented moment in American history, tinkering around the edges just won't work.
Tinkering around the edges just won't work. So they're not tinkering around the edges anymore. As John Fund reports in his column, which is one of those items, yes, it is part of the media. It's National Review. It's openly conservative. But it certainly has an audience and gets the message out there. And in his piece about Socialists on the March, the writer John Fund, who's been a frequent guest on the show, says there's ample evidence of the DSA's radicalism. DSA stands for Democratic Socialists of America. Earlier this month, its leadership issued an updated platform that calls for abolishing the U.S. Senate. Interesting. Defunding the Pentagon. Offering universal amnesty to illegal immigrants. Transferring the ownership of major corporations to the public, and replacing, quote, the president and Supreme Court with an executive and judiciary chosen by and subordinate to Congress. It also includes a demand that police budgets be cut annually to zero. Sarah Milner, a member of the DSA's Reform and Revolution Caucus, justified the platform by pointing out that President Woodrow Wilson, who was elected president in 1912, a while ago, once called for drastically amending the Constitution. She said the DSA's proposed changes would advance, quote, a vision of transforming the functions of the American state to allow for the implementation of socialism. Taken as a whole, the platform enthusiastically embraces illiberal values, which former New York Times columnist Pamela Paul has called the most troubling characteristic of contemporary progressivism. Meanwhile, there was talking about troubling characteristics. There was a major federal judge, this is breaking news today, who today permanently barred President Donald Trump's administration from implementing most of his first executive order on elections, part of which sought to require people to produce documentary proof of citizenship whenever they try to register to vote. The ruling by U.S. District Judge Denise Casper in Boston effectively converts a preliminary injunction she issued a year ago in which she temporarily blocked many of Trump's efforts to overhaul elections into a permanent ban. Now, what's the basis for her judgment? Casper rejected the administration's argument that the lawsuit to block the changes brought by Democratic state attorneys general was premature because the rules had yet to be implemented. Instead, she agreed that the Constitution gives states and Congress, not the White House, not the president, the authority to regulate elections, and that Trump's requirements violated the separation of powers. Also, new from CNN, a federal judge has temporarily blocked the Trump administration from obtaining sensitive medical records from healthcare institutions in New York City that provided gender identity care to minors in recent years. Another indication that judges are busy today. There is also a federal judge who has ordered President Donald Trump's administration to explain why did it put up a tarp and scaffolding on the facade of the Kennedy Center, and why is it still up there after the president's name was removed pursuant to a previous order from the court? Shortly after his second inauguration, Trump appointed himself to the board of the John F. Kennedy Memorial Center for the Performing Arts and added several of his allies to the board as well, who then named him chair. The new Trump-controlled board voted to change the center's name to add the president's name. The center's website, social media, and other digital branding were updated to say the Trump Kennedy Center, and his name was added to the building's facade. But the courts have now found, with a lawsuit pending, that the president doesn't have the right to do that. The Kennedy Center was established by Congress and named by Congress as a memorial to President John F. Kennedy. So they can't, just by whim of the president and his appointees, change the name of that institution. So instead, they're hiding the name, John F. Kennedy Center of the Performing Arts. There are other things that can't be hidden, like the problems with the reflecting pond. We will get to that and to more on the Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, there was a Senate vote that may or may not be important in a practical sense, but it was a very close vote, 50-48. The Senate adopted a House-passed resolution directing the president to end the war in Iran, or else to seek out congressional authorization to continue it. This is the most significant bipartisan rebuke, says the dispatch, yet of a conflict that President Trump launched without congressional approval or consultation. The resolution does not require Trump's signature, but it also carries no force of law. And the White House dismissed it as having no significance at all. Well, it has significance because it reflects the opinion of the Congress of the United States, both houses of the Congress. This, in fact, marks the first time since the War Powers Resolution was established in 1973 in the midst of the Vietnam War and the controversies about that war. But this is the first time that both the House and the Senate have approved a concurrent resolution directing a president to halt a military conflict. What's surprising to me is looking at this vote by the U.S. Senate. Yes, it was incredibly close, but if all the Republicans had been there and had shown up, it wouldn't have even passed. It would have been a tie, and then, of course, you have the tie-breaking vote that goes to J.D. Vance, the vice president. But there were only 4 Republicans who voted for the resolution, in other words, who voted to end this war. Rand Paul, Susan Collins of Maine, who often votes against the president, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, who also often votes against the president, and Senator Cassidy of Louisiana, who has just been knocked out of the Senate because Trump opposed him in his primary race. And Dr. Cassidy also has shown some independence, not voting frequently for President Trump. So how is it that on an important vote like this, there were 2 Republicans who didn't show up? Well, one of the Republicans who didn't show up was Mitch McConnell, who is in the hospital, or at least he is under medical care. He has only a few months left on his term. He is not running for re-election, and he is not well. He should have a speedy recovery, but he also was not there. On the Democratic side, every Democrat in the Senate voted for the resolution, voted to instruct President Trump to bring this war to an end. And of course, the White House would say, we're doing it, we're bringing it to an end with a fabulous victory. Most people don't see it as such a victorious achievement, and certainly people in the Senate. The one Democrat who did not vote with this party was John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, who has been the one most independent member of the Senate caucus on the Democratic Party, and who often has spoken out against extremism within his own party. For instance, he was on Fox News warning about the rise of what he called the dirtbag left. Now, who is the dirtbag left? Well, this is Senator Fetterman on Fox, clip 15.
Yeah, the kind of people that are trying to run out of office. I mean, they're just good traditional kinds of Democrats you would have expect in New York City now, and now this has just become it's just been the dancing days of the dirtbag left. You know, some of these candidates are outrageous. You know, you have candidates they abolish ICE, abolish the police.
They abolished the U.S. Senate, which you are elected to. Cory Booker, another member of the Senate and another Democrat, somebody who voted for the War Powers Resolution, cutting off President Trump's ability, so theoretically at least, to continue the war. Cory Booker said this about Fetterman calling the extreme left, these Democratic socialists, the dirtbag left. Here's what Cory Booker had to say about that. Clip 14.
What did you make of your fellow Democratic Senator John Fetterman today when he was asked about these New York primaries? He said the dirtbag left is surging, I believe is how he described it.
Again, for me, if you want to heal a country, you can't be picking fights. I think we need to understand that our party is not homogenous. One of the things that makes the Democratic Party great is it's a big tent party. We need to stay that way. The focus has got to be the November election.
And with that November election, there is reason to believe that some of the Democrats, who were all of the Democrats except for Fetterman, who voted for limiting President Trump's war powers, they do seem to be in touch with a strong public sentiment, which is not pro-war in this case. And the idea of a big tent for the Democrats, which Cory Booker says he wants to endorse, if they're talking seriously about a big tent, is there any pro-life sentiment at all in the Democratic Party? Is there pro-life sentiment in the country? Well, sure. And what about people who think that the success of and independence of business is more important than handing power to unions? Well, these are all issues in which the Democratic Party is not a particularly big tent. Their support for transgender rights, which is sweeping in the Democratic side. Now, again, I think this is a terrible issue for both sides. But again, the idea that the Democrats are some kind of huge, big tent, Mike Johnson doesn't agree with that, the Speaker of the House. In his weekly news conference, he said this about the stakes in the upcoming election, the midterms. This is clip 20.
It is a dangerous thing. This is not a joke. We're in a fight right now to save the republic. And every American needs to take this seriously. You need to wake up. This upcoming midterm election is not the midterm elections of years ago. This is going to decide the direction of the country. Are we going to maintain our status as a constitutional republic on our 250th anniversary? Are we going to make a new choice and go down some road towards a communist utopia? That's the choice right now.
To say that the Democratic Party has been taken over by the Democratic Socialists, well, they are on the march. We'll have more of that as we move forward. But is it possible that America moving in a more socialist direction would make America more popular around the world? There is a new Pew Research study, which I want to get to because it's pretty shocking. It shows overall ratings for the United States are largely negative. What ratings are they talking about? They polled 36 different nations. And when it came to the United States leadership in world affairs, what percentage of those 36 nations felt that they could trust American leadership? They expressed confidence in American leadership. 23%. So by over 3-1, and this includes a lot of countries that are our closest allies. The overall ratings for the United States are also largely negative. Favorable views of the country have declined in many cases over the past year, including double-digit drops in Indonesia, Italy, Nigeria, South Africa, South Korea, one of our most important allies and trading partners, and Turkey. We will get to what this means and what can be done about it, and to more about the socialism on the march and how to turn that march in a better direction for the sake of this greatest nation on God's green earth.